Good morning. It's great to have everybody out this morning. Jonathan, thank you for the song. He did not know the topic and what I was going to be talking on, but the song that he selected, this last one, 815, is perfect. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but let me explain a little bit. This is going to be somewhat of a Frankenstein sermon. I took two lessons that I wanted to talk about, just decided to combine them. We'll see how that works. You can tell me later if it was a success or not. So Jesse has taken some time, and I have been tasked with presenting some thoughts this morning. So if you would take your Bibles and turn to the book of Colossians. We're going to do this old school. I'm not a slide guy. I'm not that complicated or that detailed on things. So you're going to be forced to use your paper or your phone in order to follow along with the lesson this morning. We're going to be talking about a couple things. A few weeks ago, I went out hiking. Don't ask me why. The guy kept asking me, a very good friend of mine had been asking me for years to go hike, and he's hiked like 600 and some miles of the Appalachian Trail. He said, I've got all the gear, I can hook up everything for you, all you got to do is show up. I'm pretty good at showing up, I can do that. So I went, and I discovered some things about myself, and so that's going to be the Frankenstein part of this lesson. But let's begin with what I originally was going to talk about, and then I'll try to work some of those thoughts that I got while I was out hiking. And that's where the song that Jonathan led, Beautiful Land of Light. If you can imagine being out in the middle of the Great Smoky Mountains at night, and there are no stars, and there is no sun, and there is no moon, and there is nothing there to give you light. You can imagine, if you've never been there, that's a dark place. And that's where I learned some enlightened thoughts in a very dark place. So in Colossians, the writer here is going to spend some time talking about Christ. And he's going to be talking about the position of Christ. Now, I didn't have the scripture reader go all the way down through all the passages that I want to look at for a reason. I wanted one to read that myself, but there's some particular things I want to pull out of that that I want to discuss. I would imagine most of you have watched an award ceremony such as the Olympics, where they have the podiums where the winners stand up. And there is one spot that's higher than all the rest. He is standing at the top, and there is nothing above him. He's got a person to his left, and he's got a person to his right, but they are, for obvious reasons, they are placed at a lower level. Not that they didn't train any less, didn't work any less hard. They strove, they competed, but they didn't win first place. And if you don't win first place at the Olympics, you don't get to stand at the top of the podium. I watched a little bit of a NASCAR race yesterday, and there's only one guy that gets to go out in the infield and spin his car around and make a bunch of smoke and jump on top of the car and wave the flag and yell and celebrate. One guy, only one guy gets to do that. And that's the winner. We live in a country where we love our winners. As a matter of fact, let's just brag a little bit. University of Tennessee baseball team is number one in the nation right now. Our Tennessee boys basketball team was number one in the SEC conference. We like winners. And imagine this, sales for tickets have actually gone up for the men's baseball team. Can you imagine such a thing? That people won't go if they're in third place or fifth place, but if they're in first place, they're going to go watch that. That's interesting, isn't it? We love winners, and we like being number one. Well, if you can understand that, then you can understand what the writer here of Colossians is going to be addressing about Jesus. He's going to be addressing him as superior. He's going to be addressing him as the preeminent one. Israel came out and asked me about the lesson. I had to stop and think about it. Well, what would I call this lesson? I hadn't really thought about a name for it. Well, let's go with the preeminence of Christ, because that is a big part of what we're going to be talking about. So let's go to Colossians 1. Let's again pick up in verse 13 that Jonathan read for us. For he rescued us from the domain of darkness. You can probably see where I'm going to go with this. And transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones, dominions, rulers, or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Now look at this next part. He is before all things. In him all things are held together. He is also the head of the body, the church. That's us. And he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he himself will come to have first place, or I think in your King James Version, this is where they insert the word preeminence in everything. You see what the writer is getting at here? Verse 19 says, this was the Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him. He made Jesus preeminent for a reason. Now, the obvious reason that he should hold first place in our hearts at all times is because of what Edwin just discussed at the table. What he was willing to go through, what he was willing to suffer, the abuse he was willing to take. Edwin used the words of beaten beyond recognition. I think that's probably pretty accurate. That doesn't feel like first place when you're hanging on the cross. It is a time of shame. Even the old law said that it was shameful to be left on a tree, to be hung. It's a place of shame. Jesus didn't consider it shame. He considered it a place of honor. He considered it a place of service. He considered it something to do to satisfy the will of his Father. Because to Jesus, his Father was preeminent. He wanted to serve the Father. That's what he calls us to do. But for now, we serve him, and we serve his kingdom. And that's what this is going to be about. I find it, and even when we were doing the contribution, something stuck in my head, and it was how unlikely Jesus does things. You remember the scene where, and this is not even part of the lesson, it just popped up in my head. You remember the scene where Jesus, they have to go pay a tax? And Jesus gives direction to them, and they go down and they find a fish, and they open up the mouth of the fish, and there's money in the fish's mouth to go pay their tax. Don't you think that the disciples of Jesus, years after that, talked about, do you remember where we found our tax money that Jesus had us pay? Yeah, it was in the mouth of the fish. Really, y'all ever go fishing and find money in the mouths of fish a lot? Is that like a thing? No, it's not a thing. That's a Jesus thing. Jesus does unlikely things in very unlikely ways, and they're all designed to help us understand who he is. All of this is given to us for evidence so that we can ground our faith and we don't get shaken by the winds and we don't get beat up when ungodly people treat us in ungodly ways. It doesn't shake us. It doesn't rattle us. Jesus was willing to go to the cross because of what he believed. What are you and I willing to do? To us, God is invisible. We can't see him. I can't take you any place and say, Edwin, meet God. God, this is Edwin Jones. He's a big fan of yours, so you know. I can't do that. He's invisible, but what I can see Jesus. I can see his life. I can read from eyewitnesses that traveled with him, that put their hands on him, who heard him speak, who watched him die, who watched him go in the grave, who saw him out of the grave, listened to him speak after he had been dead, and they watched him buried. Very unlikely stuff. Jesus does not work in conventional ways. He doesn't think the way you and I think. His thoughts are above our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways. And so we are constantly trying to study him and learn about him and how can this relate to me? What can I take away from this to make myself stronger? That is exactly what Jesus and this word's goal is, to make you stronger. First, to get you to believe, to make you a disciple, to get you to follow him. And then after you've got that part down and you're at a strong position there, now he says, let's get to work. Let's figure this out. Let me show you. You know, and you ever thought about, I may never get to the lesson. Have you ever thought about the idea that God gives each, I was talking to Brianna about this the other day. You ever wondered why we're not like computers? Like, why don't I have all of the experience and the knowledge from my father? Why didn't he have all the knowledge and experience from his father? Well, you get some of that, right? As you grow up, you gather some of the experiences and you learn from it. But we're not like updated computers where the kids that are born today are just like the ones that were born 10,000 years ago, only with all of that experience. It doesn't work that way, does it? You ever wondered why? Why you're born as a blank slate? I heard a doctor, or read about a doctor the other day talking about a child's brain is just a white sheet ready for somebody to start writing down his story. I like that idea. I like that concept, because what that tells me is that God made us all so that we have our own unique journey in life to find him. He's not far from us. Scriptures teach us that he's not far from us, that we may grope and find him. You have to grope in the darkness, and hopefully we'll get to that in a little bit. But it's the idea that you were made for a very special reason, and you have a journey. There's a journey you're on. Some of us are farther along in the journey than others, right? And eventually the others, when we're gone, and then the others, all of us say, you know, one of these days my grandkids, if the Lord blesses them a long life, they'll be 64 years old, like me. And they'll look back and they'll smile and they'll laugh about some things, and they'll probably think about some of the crazy things I did or said. And then they'll be the old ones that the young ones are looking to. It's the nature of life. It's the way God ordered it. Not that getting old is easy, but I guess, as they say, it beats the alternative. Some days I think it beats the alternative. Some days I'm not sure. Let's go to John chapter 14. Let's try to get into this. John chapter 14, down in verse 9. This was a passage that I think there was times that Jesus had to just do a facepalm and wonder what is going on with these people. Because one of the things that the Colossian writer wants you to get to know is he wants you to get to know Jesus and where he came from and why he should be number one. What is it about Jesus that makes him superior? Because if you look up the definition of preeminence, you're going to find words like number one, highest, superior, above all. Those are all words that describe, in the Colossian writer, it's just rich with words of descriptive words of Christ. I encourage you to get in there and read that. It's just a phenomenal study of Christ. But in John chapter 14, you might remember the story of Philip as Jesus is talking about what's going to happen here in the next, few days or weeks. And Philip says, well, Jesus, can't you just show us the Father? Show us the Father and that's enough. I think that's the language that he used. Lord, show us the Father and it is enough for us. That'll do it for me. If you could just show me the Father, I'm good. So, show us the Father. How does Jesus respond? He basically says, how is it possible, Philip, that I have been with you this long and you don't understand that? How could that be? Have I been so long with you and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? You're not understanding this? This isn't clicking? I think Jesus expected him to be farther along with this by now, but sadly Philip was struggling. I know what it's like to struggle, to not get it, to not understand things, to have to say, whoa, 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 stop. Can you go back to this piece here? Because I'm really getting confused on that. And I've had plenty of teachers in that have passed and went, really? Okay, let's go back and do this again. They get frustrated. I've wondered many times, and I'm sure that Jesus got frustrated. He who has seen me, Jesus tells Philip, has seen the Father. How can you say, show me the Father? I think that might have been the moment that he was getting a little frustrated. Brethren, we have to know Jesus. We have to know who he is. We have to understand who he is. It's going to be, would Philip have been in any position to take somebody and explain God and Jesus to them at this point? He wouldn't have been able to. And brethren, we're not going to be able to do that either. If we don't line ourselves up and become a big fan of Jesus and follow his life and learn how to be like him. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's a struggle that you'll have the rest of your life. I'm just going to, what do they call it? Spoiler alert. You're never going to master it. You're going to struggle with it. But it's okay. It's okay to struggle with that because that's the greatest struggle we can ever engage in our life. Right? It can be maddening. It can be frustrating. There can be a lot of, I don't understand at times, and that's all right. But don't quit. Follow Christ. Learn about him. God is like Christ. And through Christ, God has given us the light of the world. Do you remember in the very beginning of John, when John says the light shone in the darkness? And the darkness, like Philip, darkness didn't get it. Didn't understand him. What's his purpose? Why is he here? What's this? Me and the Father are one thing. Don't you think that probably made a few people stumble? So here's where I'm going to kind of Frankenstein some thoughts into this. Because if you go to the book of 2 Corinthians, you go down to chapter 4, what you're going to find there, let me see, I want to read down. Let's look at verse 3. Paul says, even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. Now, pay attention to what that's saying there. If it's veiled to those that are perishing. Sometimes it's because people don't want to invest the time to get to know Jesus. And so they are forever veiled. They are forever covered up. They can't see him. They can't see the light because of the darkness. They haven't allowed the light to shine to get rid of the darkness. That's what you want to get rid of the darkness of this world, you have to let Christ in. He's your only source of real light. He's the only way that you're going to be able to figure any of this out. Not that you're going to figure it all out, but you're going to be able to figure enough of it out to where you can save your soul. And that is our number one goal, to save ourselves and to save as many others as we can. But I want you to look at this language. Verse 3, those that are perishing, in whose case the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving so that they might not see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is, Philip, the image of God. For we do not preach ourselves, but Christ Jesus as Lord, and ourselves as your bondservants for Jesus' sake. Now notice verse 6. For God, who said, light shall shine out of darkness, is the one who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory in the face, Philip, of Christ. That's beautiful language. What has God done here? So when I was camping, some of this kind of came into my head. And I remember the moment I'm laying there. We've been in our, it was about 29 or 30 degrees, so it was getting chilly. And we climb into our sleeping bags. And it's those mummy type sleeping bags, which, yeah, that's no. Never again will I do that. I had to unzip it about halfway so I could move, because I found out, this is one of the things I discovered about myself. I'm a little bit claustrophobic. I didn't like that. Never been in one of those kind of sleeping bags before, so I'd never had this thing. I mean, I zipped it up and I found myself like this. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be able to sleep real good like this. So I thrash around, and 5 minutes, my buddy's snoring and he's out, because he does it all the time and he's very comfortable with it. And he had to do a lot of the work because I didn't know what all to do. So he was tired by the time he got through the trip, and I was still wide awake because it's all of 9 o'clock. And I normally don't go to bed until midnight to 2, somewhere in that range is when I finally can pass out and get some sleep. So I'm wide awake. And I start looking around because he turns off the lights. And brothers, let me tell you, your hand's right here, couldn't see it. I was touching my nose just to make sure I had my hand up in front of my face. You ever done that? I was doing this. I was like, yeah, it's there. So I get my phone out because I'm starting to crave the light. I need some light. And I turn on my phone, and it's amazing how bright that screen was. Normally it's not very bright, but boy, out there it was like the sun just come up. And so I look around and, okay, everything's the same. Have you ever had that feeling like that darkness was just crushing you? That's what it felt like to me. I felt like I was being absolutely boxed in. I felt like I was in the grave. That's the part that freaked me out. Because I want to be, what do you call it when, the word just, what do I want to be, Kathy, when I die? Where they burn you. What do you call that? Cremated. Sorry. I want to be cremated. I don't want to be buried because, I'm so weird. Do you remember where they used to put a rope? I remember hearing where they used to put ropes in the coffin with a bell, and you could ring the bell if you woke up in your grave. What? No, I'm not interested in that. Not interested. I don't want that to even be a possibility. So I'm pretty sure if they slide me in a 1,500-degree oven, I'm not going to have to worry about waking up in the grave. So that was freaky for me. And that's when it dawned on me that, you know what, brethren? You and I, we're not made for darkness. I'm not made for darkness. I'm made for that. I'm made for sunshine. I'm made for light. I'm made to be able to see. God on purpose made it so that I could not see in the dark. He could have made it so that I could see in the dark. There are animals that have excellent night vision. We even have goggles that our military guys can put on their heads, and the night becomes not as like day, but it becomes enough to where they can see what's going on around them. They can see movement from a long way away in the middle of the night. My eyes can't do that. And I don't like being in the dark. I think that's the first time that I was ever in a place that was that dark. And I didn't like it. And I'm going to tell you, it freaked me out a little bit. I thought about leaving. I thought about waking Jonathan up and going, I'm out of here, buddy. I can't do this. I'm going to go sleep in the truck on the side of the highway somewhere if I can find the path and cross over the river 7 times on them little boards. And it's sleeting. When I'm thinking that, it starts sleeting. And then I think, okay, that's a great way to go out and die in the middle of the woods. So that calmed me down just a little bit. But I'm going to tell you, that scared me, and I did not like it. We need the light. Remember in Matthew 5 and verse 43 where Matthew says that God causes the light, causes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good. He causes the rain to fall on the evil and the good. Here's another thought that came into my head when I'm laying there in that horrible sleeping bag trying to rest. And that is this idea that when I'm lying there and I am surrounded by darkness, I think it was interesting that what came to my mind was I'm laying here very uncomfortable, a little scared, a little frantic, but I had hope that the sun was going to come up. That's what I laid there and waited for hours. I didn't get to sleep till somewhere around 3, I think. That's the last time I saw on my, and I didn't want to use up too much of my phone because my battery would go dead, and then I got no light, right? So I would just look at the time and I'd roll and toss around. We've all done it. But I can remember thinking that I don't want to lose my light, and I kept hoping for the light. So as an invitation, what I want to encourage you to think about is one of these days, if you don't follow Christ, if you don't become a disciple of Jesus, one of these days, that's all that you're going to have is darkness. I don't know what hell is like, but I know it's not where God is. And God is the source of light. And one of these days, if we don't serve our King, the day's going to come where we're going to wake up and we're going to be surrounded by darkness. And that's all we'll ever have. Go put yourself in a place where there is no source of light and stay there for a while. See how much you like it. And then see what it feels like when you open the door and the light rushes in. See which one makes you feel better. I know what you're going to say. You're going to be like me. You're not going to want the darkness. You're going to want the light because you're made for light. Jesus is preeminent so that he can bring you the light. He was sent by God to expose darkness, to expose sin, to eradicate it, to get rid of it, so that you don't have to stay in darkness forever. Because even the evil people get the sun to shine on them, right? The worst of the worst wake up every day and they have sunshine. They can walk into a room and flip on a light. Day's going to come when the sun's going to be gone and there won't be any electricity to turn on. The only light will be the light that comes from the Lord. And if you're not with the Lord, there is no hope for a sunshine for tomorrow. You remember the Ford commercial years ago? Ford has a better idea. Andrew's a big Ford guy. You old enough to remember the Ford commercials with the light bulb that pops on? He might not be. Well, see, I'm aging myself here. Remember that? It'd be Ford has a better idea. Ding. And every once in a while in some kind of a show, it'll have somebody go, oh, and there'll be a light bulb that'll go on in their head. We associate light with knowledge, with strength, with power. Darkness is always associated with evil and with sin and with ungodliness. We want to get rid of the darkness. I just discovered this. I hate darkness. Don't want to be around it. Don't look forward. I do not look forward to the nighttime. I just don't. Knowledge is light. It reveals. Even our kids, what is it called? I'll ask, I want anybody that's under 18 in school, answer this question to me. What is it called when sunlight has that chemical reaction with plants, and it creates the green on the plants that creates what? What's it called? Photosynthesis. Isn't that interesting? And what do green plants provide for us? Oxygen. What do we need to breathe? Oxygen. So even the sunlight is what gives us the ability to breathe. God wants us to understand the light, not the darkness. Flee the darkness. Get away from the darkness. God made it for a reason in this life so that we can go, oh, I like the light. Seek the light. Seek Christ. We're getting ready to stand and sing a song of encouragement. That's what we want you to do. We want you to come and follow Christ. Seek him out. He is the only source of true light, and he will be the only source of any light at some point in our existence. So if you're here today, you have that desire to put on Christ, we want to encourage you to do that. We can study with you. We can baptize you. We can welcome you into the family here at the Lenore City Church of Christ. If you have that desire now, won't you please come while we stand and while we sing.